There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Seán the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am, sitting outdoors. I'm so excited to be doing my first Friday reads outdoors in 2023. I did some other videos this week outdoors, but this is the first Friday reads. I am pretty sure that despite the noisy geese around, that you're not going to hear too much of that. So, and I also think this little mic with the wind protector on it, that because I'm sitting facing the wind, but I think it's all going to work out. I hope so. I've already made one mistake. I had so many books to bring this morning. And it's, it's about a 12-minute walk from my house, and I had a lot of books. I have a lot of books to talk about today, but I did forget one, so I'll just have to put that in later. Anyway, happy summer. It doesn't feel like summer right now. It's about 10 degrees maybe with the wind, 12 degrees without, or whatever, I don't know. But it's been up to 25, 26 a couple days this past week, so it's going to get a little cooler, and like just a few degrees cooler for the coming week, but I feel like maybe winter might be over. So it's a possibility of a May snowstorm, but if you want to see the geese, they're in my vlog I put up last night. I'm not going to try and film them today. I just got too many things on my mind, but they're all positive. So it's including exciting Patreon news. I'd like to welcome 2 new Patreons, and the first one, her name is Hazel. She lives in Connecticut, and she has subscribed or joined at the top tier rate, the Bibliophile Besties rate, which was a delightful surprise. I'd never heard of her, and she said she's been watching my videos for a short time, few weeks, few months, I'm not sure how long, but had never commented because I didn't recognize the name. But welcome, Hazel! How fabulous! And Paul from Massachusetts has joined. He's been supporting me monthly since I started my Patreon, and I encouraged him to reconsider joining Patreon because of my book hauls are there, and I said if you're interested in the book hauls for that same amount of support, you could join. So he has joined at the I said the wrong tier. Paul has joined at the Story Seeker tier. He's been a wonderful commenter and supporter, a wonderful commenter forever, and a loyal supporter since I launched all this last November, was it? So welcome aboard, Paul. And this is the book that I forgot. I want to tell you about the book launch that my mom and I went to last Friday night. It was for a novel set in Saskatoon by a Nigerian-Canadian author. His name is Michael Afenfia, and I don't have the title completely in my head. I'm not sure if I do, but I think the title is Leave My Bones in Saskatoon, but it might be Bury My Bones. I'm pretty sure it's Leave My Bones in Saskatoon, and it's one of the best book launches I've ever been to, and I've been to some doozies. Michael Afenfia has been living in Saskatoon. Of course, now the tripod's threatening to blow over. For not that long, 5 years, maybe, I can't remember, 5 or 10 years. And this is an autobiographical novel. He published 2 or 3 novels back in Nigeria, and this is his first to be published since he's become a Canadian. He just got citizenship a few months ago. And it sounds wonderful. When I hear of a novel by somebody I've never heard of, I automatically assume the worst, which is bad, This one does sound wonderful. And he's Nigerian, and he was dressed in Nigerian or African garb, and so were 3/4 of the audience. It was so exciting. And there was another Nigerian guy there. He's a grad student at the U of S that had a traditional Nigerian drum. I don't remember what the name of that drum was. And he played it, and it was a tall, narrow drum, and he could make the sound of human voices with it. And he actually asked my mom her name and then played a song playing her name on the drum. It was uncanny, and he was fascinating. The novel is about immigrant experience in Canada, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the discussion, there was an interview with him, and the discussion touched on the good, the bad, and the ugly, including something that I hadn't thought of quite as consciously as I do now. which is that all the shit jobs are done by immigrants. McDonald's, deliveries, it's true. Taxi drivers, all those horrible jobs, no white Canadians do them. And only white immigrants might do them, but usually not white. So what's up with that? So I want to read the novel, and I want to educate myself a bit about, and half of them are doctors. Like Michael Afenfia was a lawyer, but of course he couldn't transfer his accreditation in Nigeria wouldn't work here, and that's stupid. Medical, we have such a shortage of doctors, and yeah, that's another stupid thing about Canada. It's a very long list. So that was really invigorating. I got my book signed, told him about my booktube channel that I'd like to interview him, so watch for that in the future. Did I mention that pretty much every Nigerian man that was there was really hot? Oh God, it was lovely. There was a brown paper bag under the chair. What I meant was under everyone's chair, with a sticker of the front cover of his book on it. Some people looked and said it was food, but I was pissed off that I overheard that, because I knew it was going to be a surprise at the end. And sure enough, I think his wife or his son or somebody made Nigerian, I don't know what it is. I forget what it's called. Pot pie, and then some round donut-like things, and a non-alcoholic Nigerian canned beverage, which was lovely. And that was my dinner that night. It was delicious. So it was a very exciting night. So that was a great way to start my week. My week starts as soon as my Friday Reads is posted. Then I feel like the next week has begun. The winner of the inaugural Carol Shields Prize for Fiction was announced yesterday. I didn't watch the live feed. I just didn't have time. But the winner was this novel that I'm reading and really enjoying. When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar, a non-binary writer who lives in the States. And this is, I'm only a fifth of the way into it, but really enjoying it. I know Lindy enjoyed it. I think she had some maybe reservations. I refused to watch her comments on the book until I finished. I'm funny that way. And she's waiting patiently. I don't know how patiently anymore, because I haven't picked this book up. I read 10 pages of it this week. Loved it, but it was the first time in almost a month that I picked it up. So I'm going to pick up the pace with this. Based on the 20% of it that I've read, richly deserved. So, congratulations to Fatima Asghar. Here's the week in review. This was wonderful, and one of the things that was so remarkable about this debut novel is that the writing is so plain. I'm going to read you the first page, and you're probably going to agree with me. There's nothing ornate or musical about the prose, but I guess the adjective would be workmanlike prose, and that is a deceptive simplicity indeed, because the story sneaks up on you with the depth at which it's narrated. Called The Lost Library, Gay Fiction Rediscovered, and the editor is Tom Cardamone. And I flipped through it for the first time last night, and I think I'm going to really enjoy it. It is perhaps lesser-known gay writers paying homage to the gay books that they loved and that influenced them as gay men and as writers. So that sounds right up my street. It's a 2023 release from Wales, The Library Suicides by Fleur David. She sometimes writes in Welsh and she sometimes writes in English. The protagonist gets into a minor traffic accident, and his sentence, and he was at fault. So the judge sentences him to community service reading to the elderly and disabled. And so he does that, but he's never been a reader. He doesn't like reading books, and the books that the people that he's volunteering with, they want Dostoevsky and whatever else, and he's just not into it. And the story goes from there, and there's a change. Okay, I have a ton of book news to tell you about. Let's see here. I've started 5, but finished 1 of them. So 4 to tell you about in that category. I have finished 3. No bails. And I'm going to be starting way more than I finished, as per usual. First one I finished, I did this almost exclusively on audio. I didn't even really need to order the book, but I thought I might like to have it for reference. And anyway, is Chetna Maroo's debut novel, Western Lane, 2023 publication. I did it on audio, down on the treadmill. And it was a mild disappointment, which is a 4-star read. 4-star reads are not great books. They're good books that disappointed me in some way, and I would say that about this. The writing was gorgeous. Oh, just sentences that just made me gasp. So, God damn it, how can I anchor that better? Let's see. Put my heavy book up against it. I think so. That should take care of it. Now that's blowing. Filming outdoors on a windy day is quite a challenge. I don't know what the hell I'm trying to prove here. Oh, now I've moved off center, but oh well. I'm not going to touch anything and hope that this stays. So the writing was really good. The characters were interesting. I'm not sure that they were fully developed enough. I think that was part of the problem. This book was too subtle for me, and maybe I missed a huge metaphorical aspect of it because I didn't know anything about squash. I thought it was a vegetable. Apparently it's both. Who knew? I'm being facetious. I didn't know it was a sport, but sports is the dullest topic in the world. Although she did make it interesting. She wrote about it in a really beautiful way. But it was about a family of 3 girls, and the youngest is the first person narrator, and their mother has died, and their father gets them to go crazy with developing their skills as squash players and takes them to the local gym or whatever it is every day. And the youngest one is the only one that has real skill. They were obviously all grieving, and this was his solution to the grief: is just don't think about your mother, just think about squash. And then he starts to come unraveled a bit, and it was interesting. But there was something about the point of view of this 11-year-old girl, and she develops a crush on the white gym owner's son and plays squash with him. He's 14 or something. And then the father and that boy's mother, the gym owner, they seem to be having a lot of secret conversation. Everything, too much was withheld, and part of that, I think, was not the best use of that first-person narration by an 11-year-old. So maybe it was just stuff she didn't understand, but there was just something that I wasn't moved by anything other than beautiful sentences. It held my interest, but I kept waiting for like something. Give me a little more. I can't sink my teeth into this. And then it was over. But beautifully written. I couldn't give it anything less than 4 stars, but it was quite unsatisfying. So I think you should try it if it sounds interesting to you, and you might well get a whole bunch more out of it than I did. I'm glad I read it, or I didn't read it. I'm glad I listened to it, and I would probably read something else she has written, but I don't do well with fiction that's too cold, and this was a bit too cold for my tastes. I also finished The Stone Virgins by Yvonne Vera. This is a Zimbabwean novel, and I was originally taking part in a read-along that Bernie Lombardi was hosting over on Instagram, and I kept up with it the best I could, and then I couldn't keep up, and so I just finished it last night. Again, a 4-star read, so my disappointment with this was it's a little bit too poetic and just kind of really the descriptions went on for pages and pages, and the writing was, again, gorgeous. When the people actually became characters in the novel, which I would say was 20% of the novel, were you with characters rather than setting a scene or describing the ravages of war? Let me revise that. It was probably more like 35-40% where there were characters in the story, but at least 15% of that was about torture, just obscene amounts of violence and torture during the Civil War, or whatever that was called, in the early 80s, and really disturbing, beautifully written, disturbing, just some of the most incredible passages about the people's inhumanity to people. And very much the way it ended was about healing and putting your life back together, and that was so well done that I would have wanted a longer novel where I would have felt, but there was so much setup with the images and, again, beautiful writing, that for such a short novel, I just was left feeling, I'm not sure, a little bit too poetic? I'm not sure if that's the right word, but the parts I liked got short shrift in the novel. So I'm glad I read it. again, I think other readers, I think almost everybody in the read-along had nothing but praise for it, which is great. If you don't think you'd be put off by the extreme violence in places, it's a beautifully written novel, and I definitely would read others by Yvonne Vera. The last one that I finished late last night was Torrey Peters' novella, Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, and this was a 5-star read. I loved it, and I loved it because there was so much of her first full-length novel, one of the best novels to come out in the 21st century, Detransition Baby, in this novella that it and was, not quite as well done as in Detransition Baby, but still really well done, that it gave me a sense, once you read more than one book by a writer, you get a sense of what they're passionate about, what they're curious about, and so I can really see that Torrey Peters is drawn to, messy characters, all trans, and especially that hard to describe relationship between exes, because that is the relationship at the heart of this novella, and that was, of course, at the heart of Detransition Baby. So that's a theme for Torrey Peters, and I love the way she writes about it. Like Detransition Baby, this is very sassy, and the characters are fucked up, but wonderful, lovable, not just fucked up. And the plot here was quite interesting. Now, I got this off Amazon when I lived in Japan. Apparently it's hard to come by now, but I was on Torrey Peters' website, and she is revising this, and it's coming out from Random House or whichever publisher she uses. This was privately self-published, I think. So I'm not going to do a full review of this, but I'm going to read the updated version. I think it's coming out later this year, and then maybe I'll do a review. But it's excellent. If you can find it, read it. It's kind of post-apocalyptic, and it has to do with, and that part I didn't care about as much, but it was interesting, using peg hormone because it's in a kind of post-apocalyptic setting, which feels very near to the present, where trans folk are persecuted and denied hormones, and so they start using peg hormones. And the title and the illustration has always turned me off, but it fits the story perfectly. And then an infection, what do you call it? This is not a word that I should have to be searching for in 2023. A kind of pandemic, infectious disease breaks out because of all that. That part I was interested in, but it was the characters and the fantastic writing and the humor and the way that Torrey Peters puts social political stuff, especially about trans issues, into the story without letting it overtake the story. Just a really talented, amazing writer, and I recommend this very highly. So that is what I have finished. And I have started, let me see, is it 4? Yes. One of them is this tome, Collected Works by Lydia Sandgren, translated from the Swedish by Agnes Broom. Oh my god, this is so good. It's been such a long time since I sank my teeth into a big novel. If any of you have been following along and are paying way too much attention to my to my reading life, I've got several on the go that I haven't picked up in months. So, Seán, choose your words carefully here. But this is one that, because it's a buddy read with Jo, and she has the library book only for 6 weeks, we're going to read this at a pretty fast clip, and I'm glad. It's 100 pages a week. It's dense, and the font is tiny, but Jo and I were both remarking on the fact that it feels like the font is so small that every page is really almost 2 pages, but yet we're not having trouble, like, visually with our aging eye, my aging eyes anyway, reading it, which I often struggle with that, but it's not too small for me to read, but it takes forever to read, and it's so lovely. It's a great story so far. It's so interesting compared to novellas, and I've been reading a lot of short books or average length novels lately, not so many because I put them on hold, big novels, but just the way character is revealed, and so there's just so much to set the story up, and I am already hooked. I'm already addicted to the characters. So Martin is the dad, and his wife Cecilia was a historian, and she just walked out of their lives one day and they don't know that she's dead, so they, but she just walked out and nobody knows where she is, and it's been years and years and years. And he has two college-age kids, a boy and a girl, a son and a daughter, and they're really interesting. I've gotten to really love his daughter Raquel. She's my favorite character so far. And lots about Martin's childhood and his childhood friendship with a guy who became a famous artist in adulthood and doesn't read like a translation. It's great to read a novel set in Sweden because I'm looking this up and looking that up, the politics and the literature. And it's very literary, both in terms of how much about literature is Martin is a publisher, and they're all readers and have been all their lives, so there's so much about books. And I was a little bit nervous when I found out the author is a psychologist, and there is a lot about psychology, but it's not info-dumpy, and it's not it's not written for Freudians, because if it was overly Freudian, I would have bailed already. The first 100 pages knocked my socks off. Joe and I are both really loving it. I can't remember everything Ashwin said. I'm going to put a link to his bite-sized book chat about this novel, because that's what sold me. And I'm glad that I can't remember. The first thing I do when I finish it is going to go back and watch that bite-sized book chat, but I have this ability or deficiency where I forget what I've heard about a book. Lindy's been teasing me about that recently. So I can't remember what he said, but I'm looking forward to discovering the book for myself and then comparing it to what he said. So you can go look at that bite-sized chat in the meantime, if you are so inclined. It was a wonderful chat. So for this next one, let me set it up this way. When I make plans to interview a writer on my channel about a book that I haven't yet read, it really makes me nervous, because what if I don't like it? So with some trepidation, I started Sharon Butala's new novel. It's coming out at the end of May, and it is called Leaving Wisdom, because I'm interviewing her in about 10 days or something, and it's going to put the Zoom chat up just before the book gets released. And I thought, what if I don't like it? Oh my God, I'm so nervous. It's wonderful. It's so wonderful. I'm so relieved, not just relieved, but delighted by what I've read. I've read, first 2 chapters, and the 65-year-old protagonist, female protagonist, many ex-husbands, children from at least 2 of those relationships that are full-grown and troublesome to her. But it opens with her in the hospital, and she's woken up after a really severe concussion that she doesn't remember what happened, and a lot of things. It takes her a minute or 2 to recognize her daughters in the hospital room and to remember very much about her own self. I think it's quite realistically done, knowing some people that have. But this one was more severe than just your average concussion, because apparently she almost died. And so she's putting her life back together, and her personality is a bit prickly. Maybe prickly. She certainly doesn't suffer fools gladly, and she has very strong personality and quite humorous. And she has a boyfriend that, eventually she remembers that she has a boyfriend, and she invites him to come over, and he comes over to break up with her and says he's going back to his wife. When they first met 9 years ago or something, he described himself as separated, and then 3 years later told her that he had separated from his wife. And our protagonist said, you told me you were separated. And he said, no, I didn't say separated, I said estranged. So he's just been kind of bullshitting her all this time, and now it's finally over. And that's just what I've read so far. But I really like the character. The writing is wonderful. Sharon Butala I think she's 82. And this was written maybe when she was 80 or, something around that time. It was supposed to be published during the pandemic, and then the publisher went under. And so it's being brought out by Thistledown Press here in Saskatoon now, finally. And I can see from only having read her early novel, Luna, how much her writing it's just better. And I loved it in Luna, but she wrote that 30 years ago maybe. And, it's really good. So I'm so delighted, and stay tuned for my chat with Sharon Butala, Western Canadian writer, mostly lived in Saskatchewan, but retired, or she's not retired, but writers don't retire, and she certainly hasn't. Moved about 10 years ago to Calgary. I have also started Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, and this is for both. Is this for two different ones? Yes, it is. This is for Misery May. That's Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Gemma of Gemma's Books. I'm not sure if I know her channel name by heart. Are putting on in May. And also for Mental Health May, the Mental Health May Readathon that is put on by Kim of Middle of the Book March and Marilyn Maya Mendoza of Marilyn Maya Mendoza. Oh my God, this is so good. I love it so much. It's so funny. And, you know, the serious stuff, but it's just told in such a mad... The protagonist is so incredible. It opens with the breakup of, I think they were married, but certainly they've been a couple since they were teenagers. And he finally leaves her because she's so chaotic and hurts him so bad. He threw, was it her 40th birthday party, and she just ruined the party. She didn't want to go to the party, and he said, will you come for me, please? I've put a lot of work into planning it. And then she just came, and she was so obnoxious to the people there that not only did she lose most of her friends that night, but he that was the last straw for him, and he left. I don't know if that's permanent, and I wouldn't tell you if I did know, but then it's going back to her childhood, and she came from such a fucked up family. And I'm laughing because it's told with so much humor. Oh my God, it's really fantastic. It's set in London, which is interesting because the author is a New Zealander who lives in Australia, but it doesn't matter. The setting is really interesting. Her mother is, I think she's still alive in the present of the novel. I think she is, yep. I can't remember, but she is or was a alcoholic sculptor, and her father was a poet who won an award for the most promising poet, and that just took away all of his confidence, and he's never written anything since. So the mother's supporting the family, the sculptor mother is supporting the family, by which I mean her rich sister is supporting the family, and the two sisters hate each other. The rich sister lives in Belgravia, and the last chapter I read was Christmas at their place when our protagonist was 14 or something. And oh my God, there's just the worst rich people in the world. It's so funny. Oh, I've read about 10% of it, and this is one that's hard to put down. And I'm about the same amount into this Asian Canadian novel for the Asian Readathon, Dandelion by Jamie Chai Yun Liew. And it's really good too. The writing is lively, and it's about a family from Brunei who has emigrated to Canada and are living in the interior of BC in a small town called Sparwood, which exists, a mining town. And the mother seems a bit snobbish, but certainly very unhappy would much rather go back to Brunei. But the father is very positive about starting a new life here and resenting the way he was treated as kind of a lower class. And I think there might have even been a racial element to it. But it's a long-standing argument between husband and wife. And basically it's just the setup of the novel, but the writing is lovely. And again, because I'd never heard of the author, probably not going to be very good. Well, it's starting out really good. So who is Jamie Chai Yun Liew? I haven't looked up a thing. I don't even know the gender. Her pronouns are she and her. And used to be a lawyer and law professor and podcaster specializing in immigration, refugee, and citizenship law. Her podcast is called Migration Conversation. So when I read that, I think, oh, the novel. If I had read that, I would have been even more cynical, because those do not sound like great prerequisites for writing a good novel. And I think this is going to be a good novel. The protagonist is Lily. She's 11 years old. It's set in 1987. Thanks, Lindy, for it wasn't even just a recommendation from Lindy. It was, she gave me the book. So, what I finished was a bit mixed, but what I started it makes me really excited to be alive and reading to my heart's content. Yeah, that's what I've started, which is I feel much more excited about than a lot of what I finished. So that bodes well for the rest of the reading month. I'm going to start 5 books, which is ridiculous, but anyway, how many times do I have to describe my reading life as ridiculous before you think that I am really being not only ridiculous, but annoying? So, Springathon is on, and my one read for the month that will fit with that is this. Look at the size of this book. It is called The Ecological Buffalo, On the Trail of a Keystone Species by Wes Olson and Johann Janelle. And it is all about the buffalo. And I'm really interested in the buffalo without ever having known very much about them. It's like a coffee table book, but lots of writing in it as well about, I think, the history, environmental history, and ecology. It's all that. So I'm here for that, and looking forward to jumping in. This is not a book I'm going to take out of the house. It's so heavy. I can't believe I lugged it all the way here. The things I do for you people. Having bailed on my buddy reader Lesbrianensis, I haven't got her unusual but really enigmatic commenter name in my head yet. But anyway, I bailed on her on that Scottish debut novel, and so we're going to read this instead. Tainna by Norma Dunning, and this is a novella and short stories. And Norma Dunning is an Indigenous writer. Oh, speaking of the Denuded Glebe Literary Award, she won it for Annie Muktuk and Other Stories in 2017. She is an Indigenous author, and there's no information about which nation she is connected to or anything on here, but it's a Indigenous themed fiction, so I think it was nominated for a bunch of other things and probably won some awards. Certainly it's been on my radar since it came out, and I'm finally going to get to it, a story a week. Let me do the audiobook next. The audiobook is from Appalachia, Take What You Need by Idra Novey. This came on my radar because in maybe the most recent or a recent episode of Kendra Winchester's podcast, which I think is called Read Appalachia, that's all about Appalachian literature. It's a wonderful podcast. She interviews the author and the audio narrator and talks about doing a Appalachian accent for the narration. They talk about the book too. I stopped listening a few minutes in and thought, I'm going to listen to the audiobook first. I could get it. There was no hold. I'm going to start it. And it's about a woman and her beloved but estranged stepdaughter. So the two protagonists. That's all I want to know. I may well be finished it with all the time I'm spending on the treadmill these days. It's a 6-hour audiobook. I might be wrapping it up at this time next week. Looking forward to that. For Mental Health May, I am reading this I'm going to start this memoir, All Down Darkness Wide by Seán Hewitt, who is an Irish writer. And this is his memoir about his relationship with Elias, who had a terrible struggle with mental illness. And that's the premise of the book. That's all I need to know. Apparently the writing is really beautiful. Can't wait to start this. And finally, this one is for the Asian Readathon, and this one is also on my list of, I think it was 7 books that I singled out, that if I didn't read them in 2023, I had to unhaul them because they've been sitting around collecting dust, and I paid good money to move them across the pond, and it's high time that I read them, and this was one of them. White Tiger by Aravind Adiga. I think it won the Booker or something, didn't it? And he's an Indian writer, and this is an Indian story that has to do with, I don't know, business. I don't know. I've heard enough about it and have forgotten everything I've heard. I've got it as audio from the library, so I'll do this one as an audio text combo, and I'm looking forward to all that. So that's what I have to say for myself. What do you have to say for yourself? Comments welcome below. Thanks for watching.